This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 589 for December 29th, 2020. Coming up on today's show, my dom's girlfriend is domblocking me. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Minx, and here with your co-host, Lusty Guy.
Happy and lucky to be here as always. And for the record, those little encapsulations of the letters, yeah, those are all Minx's own, man. The genius is all hers.
I like that title. My dom's girlfriend is dom blocking me, which is pretty much the core issue in the letter we're going to address today.
Yes, baby.
Before that, our erstwhile correspondent okay, if you heard that. So the puppy needs to be in here with us, because if he is not in here with us, all you will hear will be a puppy scratching and whining at the door.
Because he wants to be in here with us.
Because he's a puppy and he wants to be with the humans. So we gave him his favorite silencing toy, which is a little big gumdrop that you can stick treats inside. And so his little puppy tongue is in there trying to get to the treats. But occasionally you'll hear him drop it and then it will bounce. So if you hear that sound, that's what that is.
And the constant licking, yeah, that's the dog.
That's not me.
No, it's not anything else you might be thinking. It's the dog.
We're not having Lusty Guy go down on me during the podcast or anything.
No,
that's the dog. As I was saying, our erstwhile correspondent, Erin VG, sent me a link to a video that he did where he spoke for about 9 minutes about legal issues in polymarriage, with the caveat he is not a lawyer and he is based in South Africa, so some of the situations he may be talking about may be legally different in your country, state, or city where you are. And there's a link to that in the show notes.
Always useful to listen to Eric. He's a wise guy with cool things to say, even if it's not directly about your jurisdiction.
And I just love the South African accent.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. The cat's in here with us now, and the dog has spotted the cat. So you may hear some other stuff as well. Now, we don't have theme music for it yet, but...
Ooh, can we get theme music?
We'll totally get theme music. It's time for Lusty Guy's Politics Corner. Everybody not interested in politics, please fast forward now.
You know, I wish I could just go through life with that warning. Like, anybody not interested in what I have to say, just fast forward. So I am going to talk about an idea that is central in U.S. politics right now, which is to say expertise. Expertise is a really complicated topic. When do you have it? When do you not have it? When is it recognized? When is it not recognized? And let me just say, I'm going to run with this definition of expertise. Expertise is the consensus view of the recognized experts. Yeah, it's a little circular. I get it. But that's kind of how it works. Now, it's also true that expertise can be demonstrated as well as earned. And that consensus view, oftentimes when it changes, it doesn't change because of a demonstration of a better view of reality. It changes because all of the adherents of the older view of reality die off. I get that.
Oh, no.
I understand. Having said that, it's still a pretty good working definition. And if one hasn't yet spent the time and energy to become an expert and to know when that consensus view is wrong, you're generally off pretty good starting out with the consensus view of experts. That's something we don't do very often in politics. In fact, oftentimes we'll just discount the experts completely, or we'll elevate ourselves and say, hey, I live in the U.S. I've been an aware person. I am an expert on politics. In the same way everybody thinks they can write and everybody thinks they can act. No, you're not an expert on politics. Unless you have studied it extensively. Now, there's no shame in that, in the slightest. There should not be ever any shame in admitting you're not an expert on things. Most of us are not an expert on most things. None of us are an expert on all things. But if you want to increase your expertise on U.S. politics, you have to start with U.S. history. And in that regard, I'm going to recommend the seminal Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. If you haven't been studying U.S. history and politics for the last 30 years or whatever, and you are now kind of interested and you've been activated by the Trump administration and the terrible atrocities that have been done, bravo. Welcome to the club. The only thing that I do is ask you to remember you have not yet spent the time in to have gained the expertise needed to understand U.S. politics. And there's a lot of stuff that makes no sense at all if you're trying to think about it from like, oh, what's the rational position? The rational position doesn't matter. What matters is what are the power forces in play? What were their incentives and what did they want? When you start realizing that, you start to understand things and gain expertise. And Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States is a wonderful beginning place. If you haven't yet got involved, you haven't actually started yet earning that actual expertise, but you got a lot of interest, read that book.
Now, all of that is reminding me, I need to reread Zinn because I haven't read that. I think it was like 15 or 20 years ago I read it, and it's not very fresh, so I'd like to reread that. Also, I have to ask, so does that mean that you are not a political expert?
No, of course not. I don't have a degree in political science. I'm an amateur political scientist, right? I've studied at an amateur level for years. I've been interested years. I have a minor in U.S. history. I've read many works, but I do not have any accreditations. No.
Our topic today, my dom's girlfriend is domblocking me. So we got a fairly long letter in from Worried and Confused, who has a roommate, and they, both female identified, have been playing with the same long-distance dom for about 2 years. The roommate and the dom begin dating, and then the roommate began, quote, putting restrictions on the doms played with our letter writer Worried. And Worried thinks that the roommate is fabricating issues to enforce her girlfriend's status. For example, she says, she has thrown out so many rules, some I completely understand and some are somewhat ridiculous. I know she is his girlfriend, but she throws it out as a trump card every time we don't agree. We haven't set any kind of veto in place. Our dom has made it very clear that she doesn't have the right to make me leave the relationship. But there's still times when I'm on a call with him and she doesn't like it, so she fabricates issues. As in, I was faced with having to put my dog of 15 years to sleep and I was crying on the phone and she decided to have a bad dream that couldn't wait. So he, the dom, had to hang up with me. There have been more incidents that include the death of another animal, almost losing my mother, me being so sick I could barely dress myself, extreme anxiety attacks. We're all supposed to move in together in a few months, and I'm extremely worried that things are going to end very badly. Sorry that was so long. Love the podcast. You're doing great things. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Worried and Confused. First of all, Worried, I applaud you for hesitating to move in with someone that you don't trust and who you think is manipulating you and or your partner. It is a terrible idea to move in with people that you don't trust and don't get along with.
Yeah, I'll underscore that. Let's just start off by saying that. Don't do it. Let's make that real clear. This is like that moment in the horror movie when someone says, hey, you go left and we'll go right. And you're sitting on the show going, no, you won't. Stay together. Okay, so here's the deal. Don't move in together right now. You are worried about it for a reason. From this letter, it is a train wreck coming down your rails.
Agreed.
Now, having said that, I'm going to take a little shift on this and say Worried and Confused. WC, if you don't mind.
Oh, well, that sounds like she's a toilet in Europe.
Oh, I thought she made it sound like she was a famous U.S. comedian. You know, I suspect some toilets in Europe are, in fact, famous U.S. comedians. All right.
God.
So, Worried and Confused. Let's start again. Don't move in. Do focus not on your dom, or not on your roommate, but on your dom. It's not your roommate that hung up on you when you were crying and had to go talk to someone else. It's your dom. The person in question who's doing these actions, it seems to me oftentimes that as you describe them, is getting away with murder here because you are A, playing the blame game, and B, blaming somebody who isn't doing the actions. If the roommate freaks out, that's on the roommate. If the dom drops you when the roommate freaks out, that's on the dom. And if they have established a behavior pattern of not meeting your needs, which is what you seem to describe, that's on the dom, not the roommate.
So one of my questions was, you mentioned that you talked to your dom, but it wasn't clear to me if you had talked to her about this. And then I reread the letter again and saw that you actually had spoken with her about this a few times, but that, quote, it didn't end well. I assume that means it devolved into arguments and
scratchy, fighty.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how the conversation went because you don't give us that level of information, but I would say that one of the things that is essential to do at this point, if you're having a difficult conversation with someone, and that is also very difficult to do, is going in with the goal of understanding the other person's position. You have to go in with, first, a type of goodwill. As we often say, you need to assume goodwill all around. Even though you think she's doing this, let's assume that if she is, it's for a very good reason, or maybe she's not. And you also have to go in vulnerable. If you go in wanting to blame and wanting to have the person admit that what they are doing is wrong, then it's probably not going to be a very fruitful conversation. Now, I'm just assuming that something like that has happened. But I find that these situations are best addressed when you are willing to assume goodwill all around and when you're willing to be vulnerable yourself. Now, that's hard because vulnerable means you can get kicked around some if the other person's not in the same place. But, in my experience, it's just not very productive if you can't do that.
This may sound like I'm disagreeing with Minx, and I'm not, because I agree with everything she just said. I will also say that you need to be vulnerable. Actually, let me put it to you this way. Have you all heard that famous saying from Bruce Lee when he said, you must be the empty cup? Empty cup, meaning you should be open to whatever knowledge is around. I had an instructor for years who said, the problem with the empty cup is any damn fool can put whatever they want into it. And it may or may not be worth drinking. So put a filter over your cup. So yes, be vulnerable, but put a filter over it. Specifically in this regard, what universe badge is resting on your roommate's forehead that gives them the right to make rules for you? Right now, as I read your letter, I'm seeing you things about how your roommate tells you how long you can be a little. Is your roommate your dom? Have you ever said to them, hey, you can tell me how long I can be a little? Have you ever said to your roommate, I give a fuck whether or not you are the dom's girlfriend, and so therefore you have an elevated position? Is that an agreement you've made? Because it's a behavior you're putting into place. And it may not be the most productive behavior. So what I would invite you to do is have a little bit of cover over your vulnerability and elevate yourself a little bit here. If you haven't made the express agreement that they get to make rules for you, they being your roommate, they don't. And they can express preferences. They can talk about their needs. And you have every right to say no. And I really want you to try to reclaim that autonomy. Right now, again, in the same way that you're blaming the roommate for the dom's actions, you're now blaming the roommate for your actions. The roommate can say, I want you to stop being a little. And you can say, fuck off. I want to keep doing this. It's your choice whether or not you listen to the demands of that roommate. You see what I'm saying? So take some responsibility and personal power and don't let them make rules over you unless that's what you want to do.
It takes a level of confidence to be vulnerable. And I like to think that if you're going to have a filter over your cup, that filter would be your confidence that you can be compassionate and listen and seek to understand and come to a mutual understanding.
Now, one other little aroma that I'm getting off this letter is that y'all have fallen into what I call the relationship by crisis model, which is to
I
say,
hate that.
whoever has the biggest crisis gets the most attention. You can see where this goes pretty quickly. So I would really encourage you to try to step out of that escalator to let the Dom know this is what I want and when I want it. Period. It's okay to want something. You don't have to be really upset. You don't have to have, your mother in a health crisis in order to need and want attention. Now, having said that, I will also say this. I hear an expectation in you that your Dom will provide you support during times of emotional need. Is that something you've made clear with them that you want from them? I know a lot of people in a Dom subspace will keep it at a very express play level. I am here to provide this Dom experience, aftercare, and gone. The next time I will see you as our next play date. And I'm not saying that you're that far along, but with rules against coitus and kissing, it seems to me that you're somewhere in the play space between, yes, this is a relationship where I can expect emotional support outside of our scening, and no, our interaction is limited to our scening. I think you might be well advised to make sure that you and Dom share the same expectations about what level of emotional support you can expect outside of your scening.
Yeah, to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, I was in a relationship where the person who was in the biggest crisis always got the attention. And after we'd been together for a couple of years and I was no longer having crises, I noticed that my needs weren't being met because I wasn't constantly in crisis. And the Dom, the guy, was a big white knight and he had to go out and help someone at 2:00 in the morning all the time. And that wasn't really working for me. That was a reason among others that I chose to end the relationship.
Now, I also have a question for you about your relationship with your roommate outside of the context of sharing the Dom. When the two of you are figuring out what to have for dinner and what to pay for bills and doing all that roommate stuff, do you get along? Are they a good roommate? Is this a relationship that makes you a better and healthier, happier person, even outside of considerations of your shared domliness? Did I just say your shared domliness? That might have been a little attitude coming out. I'm sorry.
Domliness.
I actually made notes diagramming everything, and in my notes I referred to the Dom as the Domly Dom, and I'm sorry. There might be some attitude showing there on my own part, and I will own it. But having said that, I wonder about the strength of your relationship with your roommate independent of these entanglements with a Dom. And I encourage you to explore that and ask yourself whether or not that aspect of the relationship is solid. And, to kind of sum everything up, put yourself first. It is okay for you to say, I need someone who will support me as a sub, and as a person when I need it. It is perfectly all right to say, I need someone who will value me when I need to be valued, whether or not we're in play space. And it's perfectly okay to say, I just want somebody who will whip me the right way. There's no right answers, no wrong answers, unless they don't match with your true internal state. So put yourself first, figure out your internal state, communicate what you need to everybody involved, and if you're not getting what you need from the people, hold them individually responsible and change things until you do.
And don't move in.
Don't move in. No, don't move in.
For our feedback segment this week, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some of our stats. I looked at our listener stats, and while it is true that over 90% of our listeners are based in the United States, we do have listeners all around the world, which is kind of cool. After the US, the next biggest follower quotient was in Canada, followed by Germany, Australia, the UK, Netherlands, Poland, and New Zealand. And I have to give a shout out to that one person who is listening in Belize, in Tunisia, Luxembourg, Ecuador, and Chile.
It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere.
Our Happy Poly Moment this week is from S, who said, I'm S, a poly pansexual cisgender woman from Mexico. My husband, a white polyish cisgender straight man, B. We've been married for 10 years, opened our relationship at the 5-year mark when I came out as pansexual and started dating women. After getting into more loving relationships and failing because no one was identifying as poly at the time, or we were just not aware of the possibilities, I focused on dating inside the poly and kink community. Now, I have a second partner, C, who I consider as primary as my husband. She's a French, poly, mostly lesbian trans woman. We did a triad relationship for a while, but B and C realized that their connection is not so romantic, but we still decided to move in together, and it's working pretty well. We eat together and watch movies, have lots of fun, caring moments, and yes, sometimes we have sex, the three of us, but it's not a given. The best happy poly moment was when B and I celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary in Mexico. I took the opportunity to come out in front of my very Catholic, very monogamous, very straight family and childhood friends. They were all in shock and confused, but at the end they all said in their own way, I don't get it, but I love you and I accept you. How lucky we are. Skipping over a bit, she writes, during my husband's vows, he acknowledged how my relationship with C has made our marriage better and how important she is to him. Imagine how moved I was. After that, we did a 3-way super romantic slow dance. I want to make clear it's been hard work from the three of us to make it work, but so worth it. Now we're planning to have kids. Ideally, I would have one with C since she froze her sperm before the transition. And another with B. Wish us luck. I really love your work and you've helped me so much in this love exploration. Thank you so, so much. By the way, if you're ever in Montreal, we can take you around the amazing kink community. Ooh, I haven't been to Montreal in a long time. Not since my gay best friend got married like 20 years ago. I would love that. But S, thank you so much for sharing your story. Very, very sweet, and I'm so glad everything's working out. Then we have a second happy poly moment from L, who writes, my husband and I have been listening to you for a few years, and we've had ups and downs along the way to finding where we are now. This week, in the midst of the stress of a pandemic, we had an exchange I wanted to share as it was certainly a happy poly moment for us. Yesterday, I texted my husband M that my other partner S was out of quarantine. M replied, good. Are you running over there this afternoon? As if that was not enough, on the way home, I received his text, save enough energy to fuck this dinner, too. And when I walked into the kitchen, my amazing dinner was warm and waiting. I assume you're actually going to fuck the person who made the dinner, not the dinner, but you know what? Your kink is your kink, and your kink is okay. Here's to love in the time of coronavirus, L writes. Well, during our hiatus, I got quite a bit behind on my polyweekly Playmate emails and responses, so I would like to welcome Evo, Erin, Laurel, Monocle, and Nathanael to the polyweekly Playmates. Thank you so much for your donations. And to you, new Playmates, and to all of our polyweekly Playmates that continue to donate even when we were not producing and during a pandemic, thank you so much. This is a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. Your donations help keep the podcast free for everybody, both inside and outside the community. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, please email polyweekly@gmail.com. If you want to book us to speak at an online event, such as we did with the World Builders fundraiser 2 weeks ago, email lustyguy@polyweekly.com. If you have a comment or question you want read on the show, please call 802-505-POLY, or you can email polyweekly@gmail.com and attach an audio file. Well, that about wraps it up for today's show. And remember,
it's not all about the sex. You want to go first? You just want to listen to the dog lick for some more?
That's for noise reduction.
Room tone. Tongue tone. If only I had a tongue that could move like that. Oh, I would be so popular.